Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hayleigh Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. Hey, I want to give you a really important Facebook announcement before we go into today's episode. My free former group called Health Coach Nation was hacked. And what that means is somebody made themselves an admin of the group and removed me from the group. So I no longer have control over the group. I don't know what this person's intent is with the group. I don't know if they're going to start posting in there or messaging people. But my goal for you is to keep you as safe as I possibly can on Facebook. So my suggestion is that you leave the group and you join my new group that I just made called the Marketing Hub Group. We're going to rebuild stronger than ever in the Marketing Hub Group. And what I want to encourage you to do as well is to check out who the admin is in the group by going to the members list. And if you want to report him and block him, you can do that. So I'm very excited about the new group, and I want to also assure you that all my other platforms, social media, and website are secure, and my team has been implementing even more measures of security on all of our other assets. So I hope to see you in the new community, and thank you so much for being a part of my tribe for all these years. But with all these years, we can rebuild, reinvent, and it's never too late to start over. So I'm excited to see you in the new community, and thanks so much. I am here today with another Hayleigh, and this Hayleigh is all about podcasting and podcast production. And I'm going to have her introduce herself, and we're going to talk about the power of podcasting and should you start your own and all that kind of stuff. So Hayleigh, why don't you just start by giving a little update about who you are, what you do, how you got into it.
Sure. So I'm super excited to be here today. My name is Hayleigh Hayhurst. I'm the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. So I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs who have a podcast, need help with it, or if they have an incredible brand and want to increase their visibility on there, I help them add a podcast with a marketing strategy behind it that will get them those results they want and those clients they want and all of those good things. So I've been doing this full time for 2.5 years, and it has just been such an incredible journey. I love helping women start podcasts. It brings me literally so much joy.
Nice. Yeah. So when it comes to starting a podcast, what are your thoughts on what stage should you be at in your business? Who should start a podcast? That kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I think podcasting is truly for everyone, but you need to have a clear vision of what you want to do with your podcast. So podcast is one of those things, and Hayleigh, you know this, it's the long game where you can't just do it for the short term. You have to really invest in your future with podcasting. So whenever you have a clear vision for what type of clients you want, what topics you want to talk about, who you want to talk with, that's really when you should start the podcast. Because the reason I say it's really a long game is it sometimes takes a moment to gain some traction on your podcast. But once you've put out episodes and episodes, those last forever. It's not like an Instagram story that deletes after 24 hours or an Instagram post that will just blend in with the rest of your feed. It really, whenever people search for the certain topic you're talking about, they can find it years down the line. I've been doing my podcast for almost a year now, and I still see people listening to some of my very first episodes. And that's because of the way that they're titled, the topics I'm talking about. That is really the power of podcasting.
Yeah, definitely. It is a long-term strategy, but it's cool because you can be coming up in search on podcast platforms for certain topics. And once somebody has you in their ear for a while and they build a lot of trust with you, it really can lead to warm conversions, meaning not somebody who just sees you on social media and they're seeing 12 million other people all the time and their attention is super, all over the place. When they listen to your podcast, that's like a deeper connection with you. And I think that, can you tell me too, because some people are like, well, is it too late for me to get in the podcast game? There's so many podcasts, it's saturated. But I know there's some stats about how many people actually follow through on their podcast and keep doing it. And so can you tell us a little bit about is it too saturated, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to the point that you made, the reason I work with business women is because they want to connect with this audience so much deeper than just, a surface level. They really want to talk to them. And so for that reason, absolutely not. Podcasting is not too saturated. I think that there's, over 2 million podcasts out there, but that could mean they put out one episode. That could mean they put out, I think we were talking about this on my podcast. A lot of people don't make it through episode 9 before they give up, right? That's 2-3 months. And then they just stop. And so even though there are so many podcasts out there in so many of the same topics, we both have, coaching business podcasts, but they're very different. And there's a million podcasts out there, but there's only really one of you. There's only one of your voice. It's the same with coaching, right? There's other podcast producers out there. There's other podcast coaches out there. But my clients like to work with me because they like me. And that's the big point. They like, the results I give them. But also, when I work with my clients, I really want to have a personal connection with them. I want something deeper than just, I'm doing you a service and you're paying me. That doesn't feel good to me. And so it's the same with podcasting, right? People will come and listen to you because they like you. You may have incredible guests on, but I was talking to my friend about this. I have a lot of really cool guests on my podcast, but if someone didn't like me, they wouldn't listen even for that guest. And so you're building this audience of people who really enjoy listening to you. I mean, they're listening to you for an hour a week, sometimes binging your episodes. They want to know more about you. They like you. And so that's really why podcasting is not saturated.
Yeah. I love the way you said that. And I used the example one time of just in general, when people are like, is the coaching industry too saturated? Mm-hmm. First of all, we're all in a bubble where we're paying attention to other people in our industry. But if you were at an airport, or if you were at a party, or if you were at, a concert, you're probably one of the only coaches there, or the only coach in your row, or the only type of coach that you are in your row. There is not, it's not what you think, right? But I also think, if you think about it, pop stars, let's look at pop stars. There's many of them. They all have the same song structure. They have a chorus, they have an intro, they kind of use the same sound effects. But what makes it all different is their whole brand, their whole vibe, their voice. And some people resonate more with Ariana Grande, and some people resonate more with, I don't know, the lady that sings the ABCDEFU song.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I don't know why that's the example I thought of. But the point is, they're totally different artists. And you are an artist. You are a coach. You have a message to share that's unique. You have your own background that makes your message, resonate deeper with your people. So I think it's important to remember that even though you guys could be doing the same thing, you guys could have the same result you provide to your clients, but some people want it in the style you deliver it, and other people want it in a different style. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, when it comes to podcasting and starting one, what should somebody, plan in advance and watch out for when they're about to start a podcast?
Yeah, so currently I'm running a special in my business of $200 off my launch strategy plan, where I launch your podcast for you till the end of the year. And so with this, I've been helping a lot of people start their podcast. And honestly, I've had some people come to me with very built out plans. And then sometimes I have people come to me and they're like, I don't know what to do. Please help me. And I take them all. I help them all with what they need. But I would say what most people get stuck with is the actual, like the small things. Okay. Your podcast graphic, that has changed for me multiple times. I have clients that are on their third and fourth round of new artwork, and that's fine. That's something very surface level that you really just need something to launch with. Now, the name of your podcast is something that really shouldn't change throughout your podcast journey, but the other things like your description, maybe even like your long-term goals can adjust. Everything is changeable. Your music. And I see so many people get stuck on these little things that are not life or death in their podcast that hold them back. And so when people come to me, the thing I hear time and time again is I've been talking about starting this podcast for like a year now, 2 years, however long. And I'm like, okay, like what is happening here? Like what is holding you back? And it's usually one of these things that can be changed later. They have their vision for it. They have a name. They might even have like some guests lined up or some guests in mind, but they're like, "Oh, I need someone to create my artwork." I'm like, "No, you don't." Like get on Canva, create a temporary one, and then, farther down the line, when you have a bigger capacity for this, then maybe get a graphic designer to create something. But those small details that I think people think are more important than they actually are usually what holds people back from sharing their voice. And I always say, like, there's other people out there with podcasts, right? Other people sharing their stories, their opinions, and some of them, like, of course, we don't have to agree with everyone, but some of them are out there just like sharing these stories that, why are you not doing this too, right? Like, why are you not sharing your story when maybe other people are? Like, why are you silencing yourself just because you're too scared to, you know, put out a trailer episode or listen to your own voice? Like, it's so much bigger than what we, surface level see.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The first episode of my podcast is so different than what it is now. It is so in every way. My intro was different. My title was different. Originally, I was dumb and I called it the Hayleigh Rowe Show, which who cares? Why did I not have keywords in that, right? But I started it. And I think that's the key is you have to be a quick starter if you want to make it. And then it can evolve. You are allowed to change these things over time. The cover art changed for mine too. And when you say that, you bring up a really good point because I think a lot of reasons why people don't do this is because they're like, well, who would want to hear from me? Who would want to listen to me? I'm not, I'm still not the blah, blah, blah expert, or I'm still working on blah, blah, blah topic. So what do you say to people who have that little bit of imposter syndrome or feel like nobody would want to hear from me, that kind of thing?
Totally. And I do hear this all the time of like, why would someone listen to me? I have 1,000 followers and maybe just started a year ago. Well, people will listen to you because of the ideas that you have that are, incredible. But the main thing is people really want to listen to people that they connect with. So if you're dedicated to your podcast and you're out there marketing it, connecting with the right audience, then they will listen. And if you are a coach, I always give this example of like, maybe you're looking for a life coach and there's two that you're really tied between. You're like, I love this one and I love this one. One of them has a podcast and one of them doesn't. When you're researching this life coach that you want to, invest in, you want to really help you, you're going to do all you can to research this person. And with a podcast, you can listen to so much more of what they have to say rather than someone who just posts on Instagram, right? And so it builds your credibility as you're podcasting. You can add it to your Instagram bio and they're like, oh, she has a podcast. She knows what she's talking about. Like, oh, she can talk about this topic for hours on end. I want to work with her. Like, that's incredible. And so even if you don't think that you have that authority at the moment, That's what a podcast will help you build. Even if you're not getting those high download numbers in the beginning, you're building your credibility, you're building your visibility, and you're really building your brand all together. And so start before you think you're ready. That's the big thing, because you'll always have an excuse to hold yourself back.
That is a great tip. And if I didn't start when I did before I felt ready, I don't know if my podcast, I just found this out on listenernotes.com. It's like ranked in the top 1.5% or something of podcasts within a certain category. I think it was like entrepreneurship or something. And I was like, wait, what? Now, I don't know how accurate it is, but I was like,
that's awesome.
I was almost in disbelief. I was like, and same thing, it ranks like popularity on that site too. And it was like in the top 40 or something. Like, it was crazy. I was like, I had no idea. But if I had waited to start, because you have to remember, this stuff accumulates. It's like the longer you wait, the longer you're going to have to wait for it to sit out there and build up in the search engine and right? So it's something where, yeah, you can evolve as a host too over time. You don't have to be perfect from the start, but you do want to start getting it out there, because that's how you get better. That's exactly what you said. That's how you build authority. Now, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was guests. So you were saying how you can have guests on your podcast. And I think a lot of people are afraid to start their podcast because they're like, well, I can't get cool guests. I'm not super cool. I don't have a huge following yet. So what would you say to that if they're doubting starting because they think, oh, I'm not going to get good guests?
Yeah. And that's a very valid fear. Like, getting guests can be a process. You have to reach out to people and, research them and create some questions. But honestly, you will get awesome guests because awesome people love to share their stories. And there's so many different places that you can find guests. Honestly, one of my favorite ways for getting people to feel comfortable with being, hosting guests is for them to first be a guest, hear how other people interview them, see how they schedule them, really learn from the experts. I have a course on this. It's called Great Guesting, How to Be an Unforgettable Podcast Guest. And it's really 5 lessons that teach you exactly how to, do the research to be a guest, how to plan your story, how to prepare, record, all of these fun things. And that's really what I say builds confidence for hosting people. I have a background in journalism where I was, face-to-face interviewing people. And that's really where I gained a lot of my courage to ask people on podcast questions. But for anyone who's not super comfortable, I would say, first be a guest, take this course of mine. Or you could also interview some people that maybe sit your friends down for lunch and say, can you just pretend to be someone that I can interview? And that will really gain your confidence. If you're more prepared, then you'll be way more confident in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, going back to your example about how if you have a podcast in the first place and people can learn about you, even through having guests, it doesn't matter if you're doing solo episodes or having guests, they do have a much more warm connection. I had a call yesterday with, and being on podcast, I do podcasts where I'm a guest, and then I do ones where I have guests. And I like doing both, as you say, because you're right. Like, you get more experience of like, oh, wow, that was a really good interview. They asked me really good questions. I want to learn from them, or I want to, take the same structure. It's a really great way they do that. But anyways, I was on this podcast called Health Coach Radio, which is a podcast for primal health coaches. And I had a call yesterday with a primal health coach who was looking for a business coach and found me on Google. But we didn't connect the dots that he had also heard me on that podcast. And I'd worked with a lot of primal health coaches in the past. And it was way more of a warm call because he was like, oh, I heard all your tips on this podcast and it was super helpful and blah, blah, blah. So it just goes to show you that your different hands that you put into marketing, whether it's being on a podcast, being on having people on your podcast and they share it, you never know how it's all going to connect. And I think when you start to collaborate with other people, it also opens up so many doors. Have you found the same thing when you collaborate with other people on their podcasts and stuff?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's one of the most, powerful ways to actually get visible is collaborating with other people, because you're helping each other, but you're also sharing each other on your own, to your own audiences, which introduces you to a whole new audience that, could be your future client, could be a loyal listener, whatever it is. But when I started in entrepreneurship, I did not have any entrepreneur friends. I was right out of college, like absolutely just went for it. Like I had no idea what I was doing, but I just went for it. And I have loved being an entrepreneur just because of the connections that I've made through my business, where, I've made some great friends in business. I have met other people. I'm in Seattle, and I've met people in Seattle and around Seattle, and we've gotten lunch together, and things that I never thought would happen because I genuinely wanted to create connections in my business. And so I think it goes a lot deeper than just getting more listeners or getting more clients. It's really, you're building this whole network that, may help you down the line. But for right now, like, it's just incredible to have friends in business. Like, Hayleigh, you were on my podcast and now I'm on yours. And just like collaboration like that, I think is just what makes entrepreneurship and the whole entrepreneur world go round.
Yeah. And I would also say, don't be afraid to reach out to people as possible guests just because you think, oh, they have a bigger audience than me or whatever. I mean, obviously, don't reach out to Oprah Winfrey and be like, oh my gosh, I'm a new starting podcast host and I want you to be on my show. But do go for those bigger, little bit out of your comfort zone asks to people, because chances are you're right. They do want to share their message. And I've been surprised at the people who've said yes. And I've also been surprised at the people who start to come to you asking to be a podcast guest.
Yeah.
Like I had Jane Fonda's personal trainer on here. We've had some big guests that I never thought would have wanted to be on this show. But like one of the founders, like or pioneers in functional medicine, who's like big in the health space, is on my podcast. So like it's like
Awesome.
it's cool to see it bud, and it is fun to have those relationships and meet new people. And whether or not, as you say, you get clients or not, it's still really cool to just have that network you're building. So what about when you're interviewing? Do you have any tips about no-nos during an interview or things to not say on your podcast or anything like that?
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of interview tips. Like I said, I have a background in journalism, so it was just like teachers just drilling this into me of like, here's how you interview someone. And so I would say the number one thing is to actually like prepare for the interview, right? That sounds so simple, but when I say prepare, I mean look at their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google their name, ask for their bio. One of the podcasts that I was on, she was, I think I was like her 5th episode or something. And the way she interviewed me is just so memorable because she looked up like my background and history so much. She was bringing up stuff that I did like back in college. And she's like, well, how did this relate to like what you're doing now? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that does relate. And so the more you can be prepared when you're interviewing, that's the number one tip. I always recommend coming up with like 5 or 6 questions, and also sending those, topics to your guest is game changing too, because the more prepared your guest is, the better the interview will go. If your guest gets on there and is like, what the heck are we going to talk about? I mean, sometimes that can be fun, but usually it's just chaotic and there's really no topic. So that would be number one. Definitely research. The second thing I would say is, I mean, it is your podcast. You can say whatever you want, but be very intentional with what you're saying. There's this, saying that I hear a lot in this industry of listen to understand, don't listen just to respond. And so while you may have an outline of questions that you want to talk about, listen to what your guest is saying and like truly respond based off of that, right? Listen to them, create new questions. If they ask you a question or like an answer that's just totally outside what you were planning on talking about, but you think it's interesting, you can totally like go off on that. But when I say listen to understand, it's like actually like listen to what they're saying. Listen to these things rather than like picking up, because sometimes I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes I'll have a guest on and they will say something and I will just like brush over it and on to the next question. But when you're actively listening to this incredible story that your guest is saying, it will get you so much further in getting to know them and getting like that true memorable interview out of them.
Love it. Yeah. So it's that balance of like, yes, have a structure, but also listen. And if it goes a different path, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Hayleigh, I do want to have you announce how people can connect with you and find you online. Before we do that, for anybody watching live, if you're hearing this on the replay, it will probably not be going on anymore, but you can still DM me on Instagram and ask. But for right now, I have the Inner Circle course version open until Thursday with special bonuses of all past guest speaker trainings, all past group coaching sessions you can listen to, so that in addition to the self-study, you're able to see people being coached live throughout the program and getting their questions answered, so that you can probably get all of your FAQs answered as you go each week. And that's available all the way till Thursday. So if you're curious about what that includes, basically bottom line is it's taking you from the A to Z of how to set up your business, how to create a compelling offer, how to market yourself online and get clients locally as well, and how to do it without needing a big audience to start or posting constantly on social media. You can comment course below and I can send you the information. And again, if you miss this, you can just DM me on Instagram about the course and I can let you know when it's open. All right. So Hayleigh, where can everybody find you, connect with you, etc.?
Yeah, so you can come find me on Instagram. That's the main place. My Instagram is Espresso Podcast Production. Also, if you want to start a podcast and you think it's time for you, go on my website, espressopodcastproduction.com. And under the resources tab, there's a free podcast checklist that really will walk you through the steps that you need to do to start a successful professional podcast. So be sure to download that. And if you want to take advantage of the special I'm running, the $200 off a podcast launch package, come find me on Instagram or send me an email and we will get you that amazing podcast started that you've been dreaming of.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing these tips. I think this is going to help a lot of people, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this podcast. And if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.